भगवान श्री योगी रामसूरतकुमार की जय। सर्वं योगी रामसूरतकुमारार्पणमस्तु। This evening, again, it's by Bhagwan's grace, we could sing together and offer it to Bhagwan. All thanks to Bhagwan. Today, we shall see how Bhagwan showed his love for the animals, the plants. We have been seeing that. Yesterday, I missed out on one particular episode, very humorous, which I narrated in the morning, but missed out in the evening. There is a tree in Sudama, an Amla tree, a gooseberry tree, very dear to Bhagwan. I think I said something about this yesterday itself. Though it was very dear to him and it was growing so well, completely heavily laden with fruits. The fruits were all small size though. It was heavily laden. One evening, it was about 6:45, 7 o'clock. Bhagwan had just sat down for his supper. And suddenly we heard a terrible, thunderous noise. Naturally, we ran out to see what was happening. This gooseberry tree, one particular branch was so heavy with the fruits. We don't know what happened, but it broke down. With the result, about 3,000 small, very young fruits had fallen down. The whole compound, from the last step of the Sudama House to the compound, was filled with these small berries. Very small ones. Generally, small ones will be very bitter. The big ones would be sour, but the small ones would be bitter. Very difficult to eat. And the compound space was full with them. So the next day morning, Bhagwan called 2 or 3 of the workers, especially the gardener, and then they did something. They took advice from Sri Vijay Anand of Tuticorin, Srimati Rajeshwari Amma's son, Sri Vijay Anand, who was running a farm there, to the appreciation of the government and the people around. So with his advice, they put the branch back and they put something and then they tied it up with a gunny bag and let it stay put. That's okay. Now what about the berries that had fallen down? So many of us gathered, and then we picked up all those pieces. Bhagwan was very particular. He had blessed the tree so much that he did not want us to pluck from there. He said, if the fruits should fall down, it's okay, you can pick them up. They are very special. They carry so much of my father's blessing. One should not pluck from the tree. So occasionally, whatever fell down, we would carry to Bhagwan, and then he would put it to use in some way or the other. He would give instructions to us. In any case, the fruits were all very small. So Bhagwan said, we have to preserve all these berries. And what's more, you people have to consume every one of them. Imagine nearly 3,000 berries. And he gave us the order that we should consume all the 3,000. We were only 4 together. Of course, as usual, not understanding what he was saying, we nodded easily. And then the whole Leela started. We bought 7 plastic buckets. Imagine 7 big plastic buckets. And then Bhagwan said, there is one way to preserve. In the South Indian households, the small-sized mangoes, before they mature, when they are still tender, young, they are picked up deliberately and they make a very delicious pickle out of it. It's very different from the usual pickle. They take the mustard powder and they put lots of salt. Bhagwan seemed to know the whole procedure of how they would handle these young mango fruits. So he called Vijayaka and said, you must be knowing it. So put water in all the 7 buckets and then put turmeric powder, salt, and then the mustard powder. So he instructed as per the procedure that's followed by the South Indians in these matters. It's a wonder how he knew. They say in the Upanishad, if you know that, you know everything. So true to his instructions, it was all made, 7 buckets full of small, bitter berries. And then Bhagwan called the 4 of us and said, okay, today you take 20, 25 pieces, each of you. This beggar doesn't know how you would consume this, but you have to do it. Well, we had to do it. He said so. So, now we went about exploring ways and means to make it as palatable as possible. And there were different ideas pouring in. And somehow we consumed. Not only that day, but day after day after day. I think it ran to some 2.5 years or something. There was so much, it seemed to be growing. There were times when we felt like vomiting, but then, by Bhagwan's grace, it was all right. But he would not budge from his stand. We had to consume. So we had developed many jokes about it. And I must say, despite the taste, there was ananda. We were happy Because every day we would break our brain to find a new means of making it a little more palatable, little more tasty. At one point, we lost interest completely. It just didn't matter anymore how it tasted. So it was also a preparation for the mind to accept the inevitable when it is necessary in some way or the other. Bhagwan knew better. So this is how the humorous story developed. Now, yesterday I told you about the story of the goats. Today we shall see some more of that. Everybody knows the story already, but we have to go through in context. It would be relevant to repeat it, and repetition is power, if you know what I mean. One day, Bhagwan was seated there near that tree, this his favorite tree, and I was seated there, down there. A butterfly. Bhagwan was very busy with his father's work. So I was just keeping quiet and doing my japa. And then all of a sudden something moved and caught my eye. I found a beautiful, very colorful, very unusual butterfly going round and round and round, going round the two of us. It looked so charming, so beautiful, I could not take my eyes off it. And suddenly, it seemed to move very happily. And it was as though it was devoted to Bhagwan, and it could not move away from Bhagwan. It was overhead, going round the three of us. The Nelika tree, the Amla tree, the Gooseberry tree. And Bhagwan and me went round and round, and suddenly, even as I was looking up, it hit against one of the branches, fell down, dead. Or so it seemed to me. I thought, okay, it was hurt in the beginning, but then after some time I found all that was inside had come out, and there was absolutely no movement at all. And the ants started to come. They were lining up. I was horrified. I was thinking, my God, it was well within the vicinity of Bhagwan. It was right in the energy field of Bhagwan. And why would it meet with this end, this fate? And then I thought, it just did not matter where any being is. It has to go by the fate. Even I was thinking, looking at it, horrified and worried, Bhagwan saw that my attention was drawn away from him. And immediately he said, Devaki, what is it? And then I pointed out the butterfly, which seemed to be completely dead. Then he said, oh, like that. Oh, is it? All right. And then he just looked at it, he stared at it for a fraction of a second or a few seconds. And then the wonder of wonders, suddenly there was a little movement, and then a little more movement, and then the fluttering of the wings. So I looked around for that, whatever was inside it had come out, It just wasn't there. It must have gone back into the whole reverse process had happened, and within a fraction of a second, the butterfly flew away. The whole process was happening right in front of me, and I couldn't believe that this was happening. That which was dead and gone suddenly pick up all that was outside, going inside, and then there was life again, and then the fluttering, and then it's flying away. But that day I saw how he could bring life back to a dead being. There was another time a crow had fallen down. It was hit very badly. When we came to see it, it was panting for breath, absolutely helpless, lying down pathetically. And then we knew that it was slowly dying. Then Bhagwan came and looked at it, and then he called for the gardener from the ashram. In the meantime, we managed to put some water there, so the gardener began to take over. And here I was thinking that Bhagwan would revive it. Bhagwan was looking at it so intensely that I thought, like the butterfly, it was going to come back to life. But within minutes, it closed its eyes peacefully, turned its head away, and died. Now the question is survival. Surviving the death. Surviving the death, is it grace or dying, be dead and gone? Is that grace? Both happened in his presence. I was a witness. Who decided it, that it must survive or it must go? So many questions came to my mind, but I understood one thing. It was grace, pure grace in both situations. In one case, the grace was reviving it. In the other case, it was better that the crow was dead. That must have been the grace. So Bhagwan helped in both the cases to whatever was best for the two. In the ashram, your two dogs used to be, they were very, very small puppies. And they were skin and bones. And somebody must have beaten them up severely. So they were so frightened even to come near human beings. So Bhagwan said one day he asked us to put a stone there and then offer some bread pieces. They came eagerly, but as soon as they saw us there, even at a distance, they were so frightened they ran away. And slowly, by Bhagwan's grace, he must have been working on them also because they looked so pathetic. And then they began to come near the stone, and then they started to eat. That is the stone that we see, the very same spot. And then Bhagwan said, the stone should stay there and nobody should remove it on any account. He made sure that was kept up. Of course, that story, the story behind it, already we know the details. It's a very important, significant stone. And there's a story behind it. But we had already gone through it, so we wouldn't go into it again. But the fact is, the two dogs, they became fearless. They began to be friendly, and they started to come near. And every day, Bhagwan would see to it that they were fed. And then Bhagwan would ask us to buy a loaf of bread also, and would ask us to make it into pieces and put it up for the crows every day. We would feed the dogs, we had to feed the crows also. I think it cost 10 rupees at that time, so each day a new loaf of bread would come. And if that was not enough for the dogs, we had to give the rice. From the dining hall, we would get a plantain leaf, put sambar sadam, curd rice, all that, and the dogs would eat. Out of the two, one particularly, it was red in color, so it was called by the same name. It was called a Sigappi. It means the one with the red color. A female dog, both of them. And this Sigappi became very, very bold. It began to move about very freely, and it would not allow the other dogs to eat. Wherever we took food, it would follow immediately there and gobble up whatever we put. The other dog wouldn't get anything. So seeing all that, we thought this Sigappi should be contained. Maybe it should be put on a chain. Thinking so, one day when we were attempting it, the dog got really frightened. It ran away. And after that, it was not to be seen at all for some days. Every day, 2 or 3 people from the ashram would go in 3 different directions, searching for the dog. And they just could not come across that. They could not spot it anywhere. And finally, they walked and walked in search of it. There is what we call one Samudram lake, a little distance away. They found the dog there, near the lake. But as soon as the dog saw them, it began to run. And then they ran after the dog, and the dog was running. But just see the intelligence of the dog. It knew that it could not escape from these people. So it ran, and then they ran after that. And finally it came into the ashram, came and stood before Bhagwan, as though it was seeking Bhagwan's help, rescue. It came and stood. We do not know in what language it spoke to Bhagwan and what Bhagwan understood. Immediately, Bhagwan stopped them from chaining it. He said, "Let it go free. Don't chain it." So the dog understood that Bhagwan was giving orders, and then it began to behave well. And after that, it stayed around for a long, long time. Quite a few years after Bhagwan's Mahasamadhi also, it was going about freely. It had taken refuge at the feet of Bhagwan, and Bhagwan had given what it needed. And of course, we also know, we had already gone through the story of the peacock, a beautiful peacock with heavy feathers, staggered its way to the feet of Bhagwan. Of course, after Mahasamadhi, a few years back, maybe 5 or 6 years back, it just went inside the abode. Until then, it was moving about. Many of us saw that. It was moving about on the ground outside the abode. And when one Vidyarthi of Vedapathashala, a student of Vedapathashala, went inside the abode, to bring the cooked rice for offering to the Mahalingam of Samadhi Mandir, he saw this peacock staggering its way to the foot of Bhagwan. It went and sat there right at his feet and then left the body. How did the peacock know? To come straight to Bhagwan. And it must have felt the difficulty to walk, but it somehow managed. It must have staggered, because there were one or two feathers here and there fallen, showing the way it took. And what's more, when a Siva Bhakta dies, then people would be reciting Sivapuranam, a poem by Manikavachkar. And that day, nobody thought of it. Everybody knew that the peacock was gone, and then preparations were made to bury it. Just then, Atiti Ashram Mataji, she brought one man saying that this man would recite. He can recite Sivapuranam very well. He can also give the meaning nicely. And then he was sitting there in front of Bhagwan's Murti, reciting the Sivapuranam to assure us that this peacock was a great soul, a Siva Bhakta. It found its refuge in the last minute. There were 3 cats. Every day, 3 kittens actually. Bhagwan would enter the ashram exactly at 7 o'clock. And then the car, Bhagwan seated in the car, he would be blessing all those people who lined up from the gate for his darshan, morning darshan. He would bless everybody. He would look at everybody and bless them. And the car would drive very slowly. And even as he was coming towards a hut, these 3 kittens would be highly excited. They would be running up and down, up and down, up and down in anticipation of Bhagwan's getting down from the car. And as the car neared the hut, their excitement became even more and more. And as soon as Bhagwan got down from the car, they would come running to him, and then they would meow and then go back. And then again they would come. And they would do it nearly 6 or 7 or 8 times, the little distance Bhagwan crossed to the hut. And Bhagwan would be laughing. And finally, as soon as Bhagwan was seated in the hut, the first thing that he would do, feed the kittens. So we had to put an idli there and pour milk. And the kittens would be so restless to reach out for food. And as soon as the milk was poured, they would get very busy with it. Only after that, the food would be distributed to everyone else. We saw how Bhagwan fed the crows, how he attended a dying bird. We saw another story of his devotee, how she revived the life of a crow by chanting his name. But here, Bhagwan stood there, looked at the crow, blessed it so nicely, it left the body peacefully. Now there's another story that I remember at this moment. There was a lady who came to the ashram. And it is she who narrated the story, her story of Bhagwan's glory, to Abrupa Mamma, who is looking after the Sanadi Street house. She said that she was feeding the crows every day. She would put some food for the crows before she ate her own food. She was doing it day after day after day for a long time. Now one day she had come to the ashram and Bhagwan was giving darshan outside the Pradhan Mandir at that time. And then she came for private darshan. Bhagwan called her, gave her private darshan. At the end of which Bhagwan said, Amma, you have to eat this food in the ashram and go. She said, Swami, I am in a hurry. I have to get back. Already it's getting late for me. I can't afford to stay more. It's okay, Swami, I will go home and eat. Bhagwan insisted, compelled her, no, Amma. You have to eat this beggar's food. You have come to the ashram, you must take food and go. This beggar would be happy if you do that. Again she said, no, Swami, I would go home and eat because people would be waiting and it's getting late for me. I came only for your darshan. Please let me go. But Bhagwan said, no, Amma, you are feeding this beggar every day. How can this beggar let you go without food? Now she created some confusion in her because she just could not follow Bhagwan. She didn't understand what Bhagwan said. She said, Swami, I am feeding you. No. I am only feeding some crows there upstairs before I eat every day. And even when she said it, it suddenly struck her that he meant the crows, referring to them as himself, that her feeding the crows was feeding him. She was wonderstruck. And then she folded her hands before him with tears. Needless to say that she went and had food. And then when she narrated this to Apuruppa Mamma, she was crying again, remembering it. See, all I was doing was just feeding the few crows, just a little food. And Swami was saying that I was feeding him every day. And he was grateful. And she was crying. What a revelation. So when we feed any animal, you can be sure you are feeding Bhagwan. He is present. There is no place where he is not present. He is omnipresent. And he receives them. He receives the food. So we have to be aware that we are feeding Bhagwan. Another incident that I remember regarding the crow, one day we were all seated in Dwarkanath Reddy's place, Kripa. It's opposite to Ramanashram. We have to go down the lane, to the end of the lane. Bhagwan was very fond of his visiting the place. He used to go there oftentimes. And I had joined him also there quite a few times. So one day, we were all seated. It was evening time. It was very peaceful, silent, and very vibrant with the presence of Bhagwan. Sri Ilayaraja had come, the music director. He had come there to have darshan of Bhagwan. So Bhagwan asked him to sing. He sang a beautiful song, and the song was highly spiritual. It created a very intense vibration there, added to the presence of Bhagwan. The silence was completely divine. After he finished his song, we all fell into a natural, beautiful, vibrant, a living, pulsating silence. And suddenly, it was dusk time. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a crow cried out. A very loud cry it was, and the sound was jarring to the ears. It tore through the silence, the beautiful divine silence, and came and hit us, hit our ears with a very ugly noise, totally out of tune with the silence. It was a bit of a shock for everyone. This noise, the cry of the crow, happening all of a sudden, tearing through that beautiful silence. Some of us had an irritated look on our face also. But Bhagwan, suddenly, he laughed. He laughed so much and said, "Just see how beautiful. It is the beautiful music of my father. Did you all hear? My father sang now his beautiful music." And then he laughed again. And that came like a slap. What we thought was very ugly, jarring, and totally different from the divine that we were enjoying. Here was Bhagwan declaring thunderously. It was his father's sweet music. So there are ever so many such stories which give us glimpses of Bhagwan's multifaceted diamond divinity. This Bhagwan is here now in front of us with his hand raised in benediction. We shall submit our today's prayers before him. Bhagwan, thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. There is no place where you are not. There is nothing that you cannot do. And there is nothing that you do not know. The what? Sarvagya, Sarvashaktiman, Sarvavyapi. And thou hast declared time and again that thou art the cosmic controller. We pray to you intensely, soulfully, for freeing the entire world from the dreadful clutches of this virus and bring back normalcy to the world. And Bhagwan, there is panic in the heart of people. There is news again that a new variant of the present virus has set its foot in UK and is causing havoc there. All the other countries, there are a very few cases in Europe, here and there, and in Australia. So the countries are all now scared. They have closed their doors to UK. So as we come to hear the new spread of the new variant, people are panicking even more. Bhagwan, only you can remove the panic from the hearts of people.